In this video, I'm going to answer the question, which camera should you buy, the Fuji X100V or the Fuji X-E4? Hey, I'm Raymond Hadfield. I'm an Indianapolis wedding photographer and host of the Beginner Photography Podcast. And if you're like me, you like Fuji cameras. Now, I'm guessing that you probably either have an X-T3 or 4, or maybe like me, you have an X Pro 2 or 3, and you're just looking for something more of an everyday carry, which brings you to the two best Fuji options right now, the Fuji X-E4 and the Fuji X100V. Now, both have the same amazing image quality that you know and that you love from Fuji, so how do you decide? Well, I've had the Fuji X100V for more than a year and a half and just recently spent 2 weeks shooting exclusively with the Fuji X-E4, and I've got some thoughts that I want to share with you about using both of these cameras in hopes that it will help you decide which camera is right for you. And if you just want the Cliff Notes version, look, if you're brand new to the Fuji ecosystem, choose the X-E4. If you're coming from an XT or an X Pro series camera and you have a collection of, lenses and whatnot that you want to use, choose the X-E4. But if you know about the limitations of the X100V, and despite all of its quirks, you still want it, get it. From a photography standpoint, I just don't think that there's anything better than the X100V, but unfortunately that's not the whole story. So let me break down for you why I came to these conclusions. But first, if you're new, consider subscribing to the channel where I post weekly interviews with the world's top photographers who share their best photography tips with you. And then I also post my photo walks where I take you along with me, where I go out and I shoot and I see what I can create. My most recent one was with the Fuji X-E4. All right, first, what is the point of this camera for me, right? So I love to shoot with my X Pro 2s professionally for work and for weddings, so why get another camera? Simply put, I just wanted an easy everyday camera that was not as large and didn't stand out when shooting like family adventures and whatnot. So why did I end up picking the Fuji X100V? First of all, the 23mm lens is my most used focal length, and I love the rangefinder style of shooting like you get with the X Pro or X100 series cameras, and I wanted the flip screen for when I'm out shooting with the family and whatnot. But then the X-E4 came out, and it's smaller, it's a little bit cheaper, it has interchangeable lenses for when I want to use my 50 here, and it has a true flip-up screen for when I want to get a different perspective and a quick selfie with the kids. Honestly, it seemed like a better fit for my everyday carry needs, but before I traded in my X100V, my buddy and fellow member of the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group, Quincy, offered to let me borrow his X-E4 for a few weeks to test it out. And I'm really glad that he did, because as much as I truly loved shooting with this camera, and I truly did, I would be sorely disappointed if I traded in my X100V for it. But that being said, that doesn't mean that I think that you would be. Now, I love a good pros and cons list, so let's go ahead and fill that out here. Pros of the X-E4. Okay, first, interchangeable lenses, for that 10% of time that I don't want to use my 23 and that I want to use my 50. Next, the flip up screen. Sometimes it just helps me take a better composition when shooting a selfie with the kids. Next is price. If you are already in the Fuji ecosystem and you already have a small assortment of lenses to use with the camera, then all that you gotta buy is the body. Lastly, it is easier to capture video with this camera because you can assign a custom button to just start recording video real quick. Now, I know that the X100V is not a video forward camera, but the videos that it creates is just beautiful, and sometimes I just want a real quick clip. Now on the X100V, you have to change your drive mode, then you have to go up, you have to press movie, which all of the settings for movie and stills are entirely different, so then you have to change those before you can press record. Why? This is a simple firmware update to bring this feature of quick record to the X100V. Fuji, please. Okay, now cons of the X-E4 for me. First, there's no neutral density filter for slow shutter speed, which I love a good slow motion photo. And the 4-stop ND filter on the X100V here is perfect so that I don't have to shoot at f16, I can just shoot at an f4. Also, this is an exclusive feature of the X100 series camera, the built-in neutral density filter. So if I wasn't coming from this, I don't think that this would be on my cons list, as I wouldn't be missing it. All right, next, there is no autofocus switch here on the X-E4 like there is in the X100V. Now, this brings me to the lack of customization buttons. There are only 3 physical buttons that you can customize on the Fuji X-E4, 2 of them being the Q menu and then the other one being the autofocus lock. Both of those I use, which only leaves me one customizable button, which I use for autofocus modes. In contrast, there are 5 customizable buttons on the X100V, and after the Q and the autofocus button, that leaves 3 that can be customized. Now that doesn't seem like a whole lot more, I get it, but the X100V has an autofocus switch, and it also has an ISO dial here up at the top, so I don't need to assign those 2 things to the extra 2 customizable buttons. So with that being said, the X100V just feels like there's a ton more customization options here to fit it perfectly for my needs and the way that I shoot. Now, as a side note, both the X100V and the X-E4 have customizable options for like touchscreen and stuff, but every time I look through the viewfinder, my nose presses it and changes the option, so it's the first thing that I turn off. But if you don't plan on using the viewfinder and just shooting with the screen, then you can turn those on and you'll have those extra customization options. Also, the X-E4, lack of grip. This lack of grip makes it feel considerably less stable in my hands than the X100V. Now I know that it's hard to see here, there's really not much, but it's just so subtle that it feels perfect in the hands for your fingers and your thumb back here. It just feels a whole lot more stable. Now Fuji does offer a grip for the X-E4 here, but it's $90, which then creeps it up into X100V territory, and it just adds bulk to the camera, kind of negating the small form factor. Now let's talk about where there is a draw between these 2 cameras, and that is the X-E4, right? It is smaller, but with without its integrated lens, it's still not pocketable like the illustrious X70 was. Next is the image quality. Both of these cameras have the same sensor, image processor, photos look amazing. There's no real winner here. Then there's the viewfinder. Now, I've seen several reviews where people have said that the X100V has a better viewfinder. It's far superior, but maybe my eyes need checked, but I really didn't see any functional difference between the 2. But I guess that I would probably give the slight edge to the X100V only because the magnification, it feels larger when you're looking through it. Now, who's the X-E4 for? I don't think that many people buy the X100V on a whim. The X100 series cameras is for people, it appeals to people, right? Those of us who know what it's capable of, who knows its quirks, and despite of that, still love it. Now the Fuji X-E4, in Fuji's own words, is for beginners and intermediate photographers, those who are starting to take photography more seriously. Now here's where it gets complicated, is that us fans of Fuji know that with its smaller form factor and same sensor and image quality, it really is a difficult choice to make between the 2. Now, I shoot weddings with my trusty X Pro 2s, so the X100V just seemed like a natural extension for me when I was looking for my everyday camera. But with the true flip-up screen and the ability to change lenses and the smaller form factor of the X-E4, it just looked like it might be a slightly better fit for my everyday carry needs. But again, I'm sad to say that unfortunately it's not. While the X-E4 truly is a fantastic camera, especially for those who are new to the Fuji ecosystem, and I really enjoyed my time with it, I just didn't have the same it didn't have the same magic as the X100V. And while I know that magic is hardly tangible and impossible to quantify for me and my photography needs, I just know that the X100V has it. So if you're new to photography or the Fuji ecosystem, or you're on a budget, the X-E4 is the right camera for you. If you have an XT or an X Pro 3.4, and you have a selection of lenses that you want to use and you just want something smaller to walk around with, again, the X-E4 is a great option for you. But if you have done your research and you still think that you want an X100V despite the quirks and its nuances, then it is the right camera for you. Now, if you're worried about price, currently the X100V is $1,400. The X-E4 is $900, but with the 23 f2, that brings the price up to $1,350 if you don't already have it. So that's 97% of the price for 80% of the camera. I'm gonna minus 4% for buttons and features, and then the 13% for the lack of magic that the X100V has. But for $1,049, you can get the X-E4 with the 27mm lens, which again, if you're just getting into the Fuji ecosystem, I think is gonna be your best bet. But what camera is right for you? Which camera are you going to choose? Let me know in a comment. I would truly love to know. Is it the illustrious but quirky Fuji X100V, or is it the beautiful, new, shiny, everyday Fuji X-E4? Let me know. And if you have any questions about these 2 cameras, feel free to ask. I would be more than happy to help.